Hello everyone, I am Bang Dress and welcome to another episode of Ben Talks About. I apologize if the lighting is a little bit flickery over there, but that's not important at the current moment because 2 days ago I went ahead and saw the most recent Mortal Kombat movie, based of course on the hit video game franchise, which I have briefly talked about very vaguely on this channel before. I've actually posted a few videos of me and, of course, our camera operator behind us. We uploaded some videos of us playing Mortal Kombat 9 on the 360, and so I would consider both of us semi-vague fans of the series. We both think that it's really cool. So when I heard that there was going to be a brand new movie being released, for one thing, to me this movie came entirely out of left field because I hadn't actually heard anyone start talking about it until I eventually saw it as one of the trailers for when I saw Godzilla vs. Kong in the theaters, which is another movie I eventually got to make a video about it at some point. But yeah, anyway, I saw that, I got excited, and then I saw more and more trailers being released on YouTube. People were talking about it when the movie came out. I of course avoided spoilers and all that kind of stuff, which actually was very easy for me to do. To me, this movie it's one of those type of movies where unless you're sort of like trying to search for it and then it becomes like super popular, it almost goes off of a bit off of the radar, I think it was, at least in terms of like the overall hype for the movie. But as for the movie itself, I definitely gotta say that this movie was indeed really, really good. It was a really good, it did pay a lot of respect to the series as it is today. I feel like lots of people are trying to compare it to the original Mortal Kombat movie that came out way back in the 90s when the series was still new, and I feel like a lot of the problems with that movie sort of come from the fact that the series was still sort of in its infancy. There were only around maybe like 2 or 3 games in the series by the time the movie came out, so a lot of the sort of trappings when it came to making a video game movie during that time were still prevalent in that movie. It was still an enjoyable one, and out of the video game movies that came out during that time, it was most definitely the best. Although when your competition for those are the Super Mario Brothers movie, the Double Dragon movie, and the Street Fighter movie, it's kind of hard to sort of be worse than those. But yeah, this movie, the one that we have now, definitely goes to show how much the series has sort of evolved over the years and has sort of like grown into, you know, the much larger franchise that it is today. One thing about the movies that I sort of noticed that it did pay lots of respect. Like I said, it did pay a lot of respect to the games and the ways that it is now. One thing that I sort of noticed about the movie is that it sort of hinted that this wasn't going to be the only film in this series. A lot of stuff that they sort of foreshadowed in the movie, not just like near the end of the movie, but all throughout the movie, there are hints of this growing into a much larger series of films, which I think is really good. After all, you know, when you're dealing with such a huge cast as the Mortal Kombat one, there's a lot of material in that to sort of adapt into, you know, multiple films in this series. But in terms of finally starting to talk more about the movie itself, the overall plot of it is very similar to the plot from the first movie. It starts out with the basic premise is that, you know, a group of fighters are all gathered together to fight in this huge like universal sort of tournament where the people of the Earth realm as well as the people of Outworld are sort of going at each other, and the main villain of the movie, Shang Tsung, is gathering up all these people so that he could sort of cheat the tournament into Outworld's favor so that they can have an easier time winning this tournament, because because Outworld has apparently already won 9 of them, and they only need to win 1 more in order to have the most dominance out of all the realms. So on the opposite side, you have pretty much the for the most part, the sort of cast that we sort of expect for this Mortal Kombat movie, there's characters like Liu Kang, Sonya, Kano, Jax from Mortal Kombat 2, which was kind of off-putting to me, but to be fair, he did make it a cameo appearance in the original movie, so I guess it sort of makes sense. Raiden is obviously there, and then I am going to be going into spoiler territory for certain parts of it, so if you don't want to know anything about spoilers, may as well just stop watching the video now. But one thing that I think lots of people have noticed about the film is the severe lack of Johnny Cage, who was one of the main staples of the Mortal Kombat series for quite a while. He was one of the original characters from the original roster from the first game, so I feel like it was sort of off-putting to see him not be in this film, but in a way, with the sort of tone that the movie has, especially when compared to the first one, it sort of wouldn't make sense to have a more comedic character like Johnny Cage be in this film that is meant to take itself far more seriously compared to, other video game films, especially, like I said, comparing it to the first one. So I feel like he sort of wouldn't fit, and honestly, Kano actually fits the comic relief character out of the group, which is actually pretty good. I sort of almost felt like Kano was going to get a bit more on the annoying side, but the way they portrayed him as well as the actor, they managed to do the character justice. He was enjoyable and funny to watch, but he was still the sort of Kano that we know him as from the games. And of course, he eventually betrays the group and joins Outworld because, it's Kano. He's basically going to do anything if he gets paid good money for it. Of course, the main attraction for this movie is Scorpion and SubZero, who are essentially the two mascots of the entire franchise, and their entire storyline throughout the film I thought was really compelling. One of the things I sort of noticed about and this sort of goes to not just the film itself, but also the games in the series as well. Originally, lots of the time they tried to portray Scorpion as the villain, as opposed to SubZero, who they are usually portrayed as the hero of the group. But in this movie, and in the more modern games, they sort of try to make it so that it's the reverse, where Scorpion is the more sympathetic character, and SubZero is actually the more cold-blooded sort of character. And the most intense parts in this movie are definitely whenever SubZero appears, because when you first see him, you first see him in the prologue for the film, where he actually ends up killing Scorpion's entire clan, which eventually makes him into the version of Scorpion that we know him as in the games. And throughout the film, he's basically used as an assassin by Shang Tsung, trying to get rid of as many of the Earthrealm's fighters as quickly as possible. And anytime whenever you see him, he doesn't when you see him on screen, he like captivates you. He's like a horror movie villain, you just see him just standing there, way in the distance, and when they finally get him all the way close up to, him being in the action, he takes center stage essentially. Which, I thought he was by far the most him and Scorpion's storyline was definitely the most interesting of the parts of the film. One thing that I also liked was how they made certain adjustments to the original game story that sort of did this movie a lot more favors. One of the things is that there's one major thing, but some of the other smaller things I wanted to talk about was the fact that, like I said, Kano is actually portrayed as one of the heroes at first, and even though, for the most part, if you know about the games and their story, it was pretty obvious that Kano was going to betray the group eventually, because, like I said, he's Kano. But that was something that I thought was really good. Another thing that I enjoyed is that they made Sonya was a character who, the main reason why she became part of the tournament, at least in the games, was because of the fact that, she is constantly searching for Kano so that she can, so that she can kill him, because, they're constantly at heads with each other throughout the throughout the series. But in this film, they portray her as a sort of a character who wasn't meant to be in the tournament. She's not one of the chosen characters, but she eventually becomes one. And I thought that was a really good story arc to have for her. As well as her relationship with Jax. That was a great, I thought that was really good to see throughout the movie. The villains in the movie are weren't necessarily what I would call the most compelling. A lot of them were characters, like I said, they were characters from, you know, the games that we were all that were all recognizable. But for me, at least, the only characters that really seemed compelling that were on the villain side was Shang Tsung and SubZero. A lot of the other characters are sort of introduced during the middle of the movie or the last portion of the movie. One of the biggest examples, I think, is the way they incorporated Goro into this film, because they hint at him earlier on in this movie, and then when you finally get to see him, he only goes through one fight scene in the movie, and you know, he's sort of taken care of, not necessarily taken care of easily, but it seemed like he should have made a bit more of an impact throughout the movie. I feel like if you replaced one of the other characters and replaced them with Goro, I think that would have made his fight with one of the characters a lot more compelling. And it also, I feel like, would sort of done the movie better by sort of not necessarily entirely shrinking the cast, but making slight tweaks to the cast, getting rid of characters that were obviously just there for the sake of fan service. So one of the prominent characters that I think of is I believe her name was Katara. She was the gargoyle character who was, I believe she first appeared in one of the 3D games that were on the PlayStation 2, and she sort of felt like she was just there for the sake of being there to give the characters a unique fight scene, even though all these characters are already crazy enough that any sort of fight scene with any of them would be entertaining on their own. Another character that I thought could have been done a little bit better was Kabal, who was a character who was introduced in Mortal Kombat 3, who, in this film, at the very least, they gave him some sort of, you know, it was told that he has some sort of a rivalry with Kano, but he only has a few occasional comedic lines throughout the movie, and then he gets the fight scene near the end against Liu Kang, and then, you know, that's basically the ending of his character. I feel like they could have done a little bit more if the plot was sort of a bit more focused on certain things. I feel like if we gave these characters a bit more screen time and a bit more time to, you know, be characters, I feel like that would have made their inclusion a bit more entertaining rather than having these characters for the sake of, you know, fan service. Also, another one of the villains was Melina, who, as you know from the games, was Katana's sort of semi-sister character, and I feel like her storyline wasn't really done that much justice, mostly because the character of Katana is not mentioned throughout any of the film. They do hint at her for her to at least a version of her to possibly appear in the later movies, but I feel like without her character, Merlina sort of doesn't get that much to do, other than to be the right-hand person for Shang Tsung. So I feel like if she was replaced with with an alternate character, it would have made it so that it didn't feel like it was so like cluttered up with characters. And speaking of characters, the one final character that I feel like a lot of people are going to be sort of divided on is the character of Cole, who is the original character made up specifically for this movie. And at first I did not know of the fact that he was going to be just an original character who never appeared in the games. I at first thought that this was going to be our equivalent to Liu Kang, but eventually during the later half of the movie, when they actually get to Raiden's lair, we eventually meet Liu Kang, you know, their version of Liu Kang, which is the one that most people would understand of, like, seeing them as Liu Kang from the games. And then I'm thinking to myself, okay, so this character is not Liu Kang, maybe they're gonna make this character into their version of Kung Lao, who was a character who had some sort of connection with Liu Kang, which I thought would have been pretty cool. And then once they're all doing their training, and the characters from Outworld start to invade the the temple, then suddenly their version of Kung Lao suddenly appears out of nowhere with no actual build-up. He just sort of appears, and he and Liu Kang seem to have some sort of a connection. They're sort of dynamic with each other, and especially when they're interacting with Kano is really nice. But then there's this, and then there's this. We still see this character, and it's like, who is this character going to eventually be? And then we later find out later on in the film that he's actually a descendant of Scorpion's family heritage, who is sort of sort of telepathically connected to this character of Cole, who throughout the film Scorpion is in this area in hell where he's trying to get his way out of there so he can take his revenge on SubZero, which we understand why as we see throughout during the beginning prologue of the movie, but then we think to ourselves, then I realize this character is a character who's made up for, this movie. He's not one of the characters that are actually from the games, and I can sort of understand why people could be divisive on that, for one of the main reasons because, we had to take out one of the mainstay characters of the series to bring in this new character who none of us know anything about. That being said, I feel like his storyline with his family and trying to learn about what his secret, power is supposed to be, I felt like that was sort of a compelling storyline, and considering this character is the one who gets the most amount of screen time, he's sort of, I've sort of interpreted him as the main character who you're sort of supposed to, put yourself in the place of, which is kind of why, this is a character who seems to be made up for the film, and, his power may seem rather generic, especially when compared to all the others, but I do feel like the fight scenes that he has, especially with Goro and him teaming up with Scorpion to fight SubZero at the end of the movie, I thought those were all really interesting, and, his storyline, since we see it have a conclusion from beginning to end, I thought was, if they did have to make up an original character, I feel like they did the best that they could. That being said, I also do really, the connection that he had with Scorpion was something that I didn't really expect, and I at first thought that possibly during his fight with Goro, where he would eventually find his power, I was going to think to myself, okay, so this character is eventually going to become our version of Scorpion, which, I thought that was going to be the case, considering that we hadn't really seen anything from Scorpion in any of the trailers for the movie, except for the fight scene that would end up happening near the end of the movie. So I thought to myself, this character Cole, since he has some sort of connection with Scorpion's heritage, he was eventually gonna end up taking the mantle and be the Scorpion that we know from the games, but that wasn't actually the case, which was, I thought would have been a sort of an interesting twist. I felt like that could have led to an interesting sort of plot of them sort of like being at each other, who trying to take control over like the Cole spirit and Scorpion spirit sort of like battling it out, and them trying to eventually having to work together to beat SubZero, which they eventually beat him at the end of the movie. But they do it. They're definitely shown to be like separate entities, which which was fine, but I just sort of expected it to end off a little bit differently. But yeah, overall, I do think that this film was really, really good, and it did pay a lot of respect to the video game series. One thing that I do sort of am sort of concerned about is if they do end up making a sequel, I do hope that they do take their time with it, because the storyline for Mortal Kombat in terms of the games is very, very huge. There's lots of stuff going on in the movie. In the games, there's lots of different characters, different storylines, especially when you get to the point where the series went into 3D, the little cast becomes larger and larger and larger, and I hope that when we do eventually start seeing more new characters, I hope that they're able to have enough time to give us new characters, but also not have a humongous cast of characters, so that each one has more time to develop as a character. More specifically, the villains. I feel like the villains should be done a lot more differently compared to how they did it in this movie. It wasn't necessarily a turn-off for me, but I do feel like the villains could have been done better. The way that the heroes were portrayed, I thought was really good. A lot of them had a lot of time to have a sort of arc for them. Even for characters that weren't on screen for a really long time, I feel like there was enough time with the heroes to have all their storylines be compelling. With the exception of Liu Kang and Kung Lao, the only thing that really happens to these two characters is that Kung Lao dies eventually near the middle half of the movie, and Liu Kang, he has to learn how to like move on and avenge Kung Lao, but I feel like their characters could have been sort of explored on a little bit more, and I feel like if they were to do a sequel to this, I would prefer it not being a movie sequel. I feel like it would be a better idea to make it into a TV series. And I feel like if they made it into a show as opposed to another film, that would give them enough time to introduce new characters and make all of them sort of compelling with each other and have a more of an ongoing sort of story arc. Because TV shows by comparison are much longer than movies, meaning they're allowed to have a lot more. They're allowed to add more stuff to it and not be as they don't have to be stuck with a certain runtime. It may seem like the quality of a TV series wouldn't be as like high as a film, but considering the fact that movies have been sort of taking a sort of hiatus, considering the whole pandemic that's been going on, I feel, and the fact that we have characters like. We have TV shows like The Mandalorian, which look just as good as any of the films in the Star Wars series. I feel like making a Mortal Kombat TV series that's in this same continuity as this film would be. I feel like that would just be a better idea because it would give us more time to create this sort of world with all these characters that we love. But overall, I did still really, really enjoy this movie, and if you are a Mortal Kombat fan. And I would definitely recommend that you check this out if you haven't already. I mean, the movie's been out for like a week now, so I'm pretty sure all the Mortal Kombat fans have already seen it. But if you aren't sure and you're a fan, I suggest that you go ahead and see it. So I hope you all enjoyed me talking about this movie. This video actually sort of came out of left field because I wasn't sure if I was going to make a video on it or not. But I feel like I had enough material and enough to say to sort of warrant it being an episode of Ben Talks About. So until I see you all next time with whatever subject I decide to talk about, I am Ben Charles, and bye.